I can't hear it.
You can't hear it. Yeah, I think we're fine. What's right? We like a little music as long as we don't lose our licensing.
She is she blasting country over there, or what is it?
Yeah, of course we blast country over here. I mean, this is Prineville, Reagan.
I mean, that makes sense.
All
Well,
right. Well, we are recording, so do you want to join the podcast or we could have you a
she's
special guest? Or you would then, I think, is she right now tied for most appearances on the podcast?
yeah, she would have to be Representative Breeze Iverson.
Right.
Listen, it's hard to talk about the legislature right now because of how much it is a rudderless ship, Brian. There's transportation, and the House Republicans had a press conference yesterday. And I mean, Leader Drazen did say this correctly. I can't give feedback on a transportation package because there's no package. There isn't a public package. There isn't even one being discussed behind closed doors. There's all this concern about education funding. I haven't seen or heard even a whisper of a plan.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, of course, when all the best laws are made, is when there's no leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, the rudderless ship is speeding downstream until we get a budget forecast, right? And then I don't know, we'll start seeing some of the crazy policy stuff start getting hearings because they can only fill in committee time with informational hearings for so long
Right.
before they have to start hearing bills. I mean, there's thousands of them. So, I mean, when are they going to start hearing them? Let's get going, you know?
Well, in housing, we're hearing about four meeting, and so you hear about eight bills in a committee week, right? Because every committee, basically, the policy committees, they eat either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. But Brian, one of the things I find super entertaining is there is a gossip column in the legislature now
Yeah, this is great.
called Oregon Lady Whistleblower, the social pages of Oregon Lady Whistleblower. So this email just goes out. I don't even know how they picked their original list to send to, but it was mostly Democrats, and I got it forwarded to me. And I think the first one is the most interesting one. It's there's been more. There's been quite a few more. It's like two or three. Oh, I guess this one's the third edition that I got. So I didn't even see editions one and two. But the scoop you need, the spice you love. Oh, darlings, hold on to your coffee mugs because I've got a fresh cup of capital gossip that's hotter than a takeout burrito at lunch hour. And then it just goes into some capital drama about the newly appointed Rep Watanabe hiring a chief of staff from the majority office. Calls Representative Bowman's office just a bro fest, which I thought was really funny. It
That's funny.
mentions certain representatives and their management style. It's super interesting. But this is the kind of stuff that happens when you don't have leadership and you don't have a direction. Is people got too much time on their hands and they start doing stuff like this. So it's written. There's a ton of emoji in it, and anybody who wants to try to get on this list, all you have to do is email or.lady.whistledown at tutamail.com. And so I did that, and then you get like a response, and they put you on the list, and then you can get these clips. And so I've just, got to get on it, got to learn
Yeah.
about what the
I
workplace
see.
drama is, right?
I think Dirk already went there and emailed him. So from OPB, I'm sure he's on it.
Well, I'll make
Somebody said
sure.
it.
We better text him, make sure he's
Yeah,
on it.
right.
So, but it's
People
just
love gossip, man. It's a little bit of the fun part of the Capitol, besides the Capitol crud, right? That's the horrible part. And then the fun part is kind of a little bit of the gossip that happens within offices and caucuses. And, it does make it rather entertaining, but you're so spot on with it happens when people are bored. And so they just kind of start going, or staffers are bored. So they start doing some funny stuff. But my favorite part is I love Watanabe. That's my favorite name now, I think, in the Capitol. So
agreed.
it used to be Wawin just because, I used to call Howin during campaign season and I knew it was Wawin, but it was more fun to say Howin. But we found out how she won. So that's for sure. That was my favorite name, but I think Watanabe's changed, has taken the lead on that because that's just kind of a cool name to say.
Yeah, I think it's great. She seems pretty cool. Haven't had a chance to meet her yet, but I'm sure I will. I ran into some of her staff today, and
Well,
so looking forward to that. So you mentioned the
speaking of,
campaigns, Brian, and you actually got to go to. You were invited to a place that is normally full of Republicans, the Portland City Club, I believe. You were invited onto a panel, and I actually, I was a bad friend. I forgot to ask you how this went. They had asked me to appear as well. I couldn't make it, and you're there, so you were kind of the only Republican, right? To go to this thing and talk to the City Club. Who else was on the panel, and how did it go?
well, there was one former Republican that they invited to be on the panel, Charlie Conrad, but we know he's not a Republican. So, which it was fun. And I don't have any ill will towards Charlie as a person. I think he's a fine guy. I think he means well, but he really never really was a Republican. You come to find out, right, that it just wasn't really the scenario that he wanted. I think he knew he needed to be a Republican to be in the legislature, and true colors just kind of worked their way through. So the other two panelists that I was on was Annie Ellison and Carrie Chisholm, which are both, I think, highly regarded political strategists on the Democrat Party. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, Carrie's worked with both U.S. senators. Annie did. I think both of them did a ton of the city council races in Portland because there was what 99, 98 candidates or something. So pick your flavor with those two, of how many they did. So that was interesting talking to them about the city council stuff because it was just crazy. But one of the cool things, and Carrie talked about it, and if you go to YouTube, and it's City Club PDX, and it's on YouTube, so you can go watch it if you want to. And it was only an hour, so it was pretty fun. But Kerry was talking about the city council races, and what I found, what he said is what we said, is that in some of those East Side races, we could have snuck a couple of Republicans in to that ranked choice voting, and he was surprised that we didn't sneak any Republicans in. Go grab somebody with some funky names and sneak him into a ranked choice voting, and we'd find, two or three Republicans on city council potentially in Portland. And I said, yeah, there's not really a coordinated effort to go tackle Portland from the Republican side of the world. We care a little bit about East Portland, and that's about where it dies. So it was fun. We had a good time talking about Trump and why Portland's just so weird and why it still votes so hard left. And the main takeaway that I think I really hit with that was that in Portland, people will vote issues. They'll vote for issues that we care about more as Republicans than Democrats care about. So Measure 118 is a prime example, right? Like we blocked all of those tax increases and stuff. And, people would consider that more Democrats would support that than Republicans, obviously. But it fails miserably in Portland. Even in Portland, it fails miserably. Ranked choice voting failed, but as soon as you put an R in front of something, they immediately vote against it no matter what. So I think it's more, and my whole takeaway when I told them, I said, it's become cultural in Portland. It's not even the issue or the candidate. It's just cultural. Like they just can't vote for a Republican no matter what. No matter what the brand, no matter what it is, right to life doesn't matter, abortion doesn't matter, Trump, it's just you're an R, they're not voting for you.
Well, and this is something that you said during your prep for this that I remember you saying is basically like we don't do better than 25% in Multnomah County. And I was chatting with another operative, and I said, I think if we're going to rebuild the Republican Party in this state, a lot of people say, well, you just have to crack Portland to figure it out. And I was like, I can see why you'd think that because it's the biggest area in the state and it's the place that we perform the worst, basically, in most cases. But we're still shedding a lot of votes in every other county, including the reliably red counties. And I just kind of sort of feel like we need to take a different approach, which is start from zero. We don't assume any of the third party organizations that are traditionally Republican are going to do anything. We start from zero and we start over and we say we're going to shore up the Republican base in every red county first. We're going to start with our base. We're going to make sure that we have an operation to contact them, turn them out, get them energized, all that stuff. And then we move to competitive counties, which includes Clackamas and Deschutes and some of these other ones, right? And then, very last, once you've got your machine functional, well oiled, working on Republicans, persuading non affiliates, then you can go into the hardest territory, which is Portland. And a lot of people just want to jump straight to Portland and put some ads on TV. And I think that there's pretty clear we're missing some infrastructure to capitalize on those dollars and that advertisement.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not only infrastructure, because I even joked when I said when I was joking there, um, I even said it's kind of funny when you don't even worry about Portland and there. So why didn't you find anybody? And I go, well, because I couldn't find anybody to run. I mean, nobody's going to come out of their house and run for city council as a devout Republican in Portland. Like they don't want they don't want to get destroyed. So that was definitely a reason why a lot of people are just not going to run in those areas and do stuff. So it's a very difficult space to be. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to run for office statewide, and I even said this to the city club, I just ignore Portland. I think you can go pull votes from all the way back. I went back to 2002, even when before any of the other stuff, and you go all the way up until Drazen in 22, and even Will Lathrop in 24, and it's basically 68,000 to 82,000 votes, and it's just not changed. Dudley was on the high end of that. Dennis Richardson was on the high end of that. But it's not like they went and yanked 35% or got 38%. It was just the gross vote it's just not there.
No, you're totally right. And that 68 to 80 is the Republican range, right? And
Yep.
then Democrats poll, 2 to 3 times that
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of Multnomah County, probably 3 to 4 times that really out of
Yeah.
out of Multnomah
Yeah.
County.
And the reason why we're losing is Multnomah hasn't changed, but what we're losing is we've lost tons of ground in Washington County. We've lost, ground in Marion County. We're losing ground in, I think, the 99 area, going out towards McMinnville, the Yamhill County and stuff. We're losing ground in Clackamas County. We lost ground last cycle, right? Where we were gaining
Yep.
ground before. So I think that's the area I would focus on is those other areas, those other populous counties that have rural areas with them, and probably a lot of non-affiliated voters who probably didn't vote, even Republicans that probably didn't vote. And that's what I would focus on and drive, because you can't defeat the castle on the liberal hill. You have to surround it and you got to starve it out.
That is a great way to explain it. Let's see what else we want to do on this agenda. Some quick follow up. We had Congresswoman Hoyle on the podcast. Really appreciate her engaging with us on that. That was maybe 3 weeks ago, and she sent a press release this week saying that she has to leave the DOGE Caucus. She said it is impossible for us to do the important work, talking about utilizing taxpayer resources efficiently, when unelected billionaire Elon Musk and his lackeys are set on burning down the government and the law to line his own pockets and rip off Americans across the country who depend on government services to live with dignity. Some strong feelings from the Congresswoman. And this is, I think, a bigger conversation that's really fascinating to me is the look at what Elon is doing at the federal government with DOGE and how it's being reported and all this stuff. And my kind of thought is that when you have so much government money that has gone out for so long, that the minute you cut it off, there's obviously going to be a outcry, right?
Yep.
But we are like $33 trillion in debt. There needs to be a significant look at the budget and an aggressive look. And I think that no matter how you do it, it's always going to be attacked. And, we'll see how the lawsuits go. But, so far, they're continuing to go and mostly unheeded or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, unblocked by the courts.
Hmm.
So there's obviously some parts of it that are probably going to remain and be legal, and maybe some of it will get reversed. But ultimately, I think they're trying to turn Elon into a villain. I'm sure they're looking at polling and saying that that's kind of the route they need to go. That's kind of what I read from this. But I'm not sure that that's going to work because even though Elon Musk might become unpopular, he doesn't care and he's not on the
Yeah.
ballot. And I think that that is sort of the potential mistake that the Democrat messaging machine is making here because, again, they're a bit of a rudderless ship without a direction.
Yeah, and I think what I've really found with that is there's no real Democrat leader right now. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries seems to be throwing his name out there or trying to do stuff, but he's not getting anywhere. Chuck Schumer is a disaster for the Democrats. I mean, I just say keep putting him out there if you're us, because oh my God, the guy can't even he doesn't even know how to hold a beer when he was trying to do this stuff with Trump. Like, oh, your guacamole and your beer is going to get expensive over Trump putting tariffs on Mexico. Before he even could get done with that press conference, Mexico caved, and so my beer, guess what, Chuck, isn't going up for Sunday's Super Bowl. So I mean, so it's just really, really rudderless in the Democratic Party nationally. It is really pathetic, and I think this attack on Elon Musk it kind of falls flat because there's a lot of people that like Elon, especially in the tech world. You know, one of my favorite podcasts is the All In podcast, and those guys they also there were some of them were never Trumpers and they turned around and they're now Trump fans, and mostly because of this Doge stuff, because they understand that the value of money and the value of debt and all of the things, and they want America to be the strongest tech, capital in the world because it's the safest, right? So I think they're missing a huge group of people here. I mean, I think you'd even throw Mark Zuckerberg into this mix. All these guys on the All In, and I was listening to it actually today. I was finishing up an episode from last week, and one of the guys that starts he's involved in your favorite company, Waymo, the driverless cars, and
Hey, it's not the Waymo's fault. It's never the Waymo's fault. It's always
yeah,
the people's fault.
but he said a stat, and I looked it up, and he's right. If you took 2019 spending for federal government and you overlaid 2024 federal revenue, do you realize we would have a $500 billion surplus?
That's crazy.
That's how much, and we have a $3 trillion deficit. That tells you how much money the Biden group was just throwing out the door to these stupid USAID packages and all of this crap that is just, the food saves America thing, all this just route with just fraud and just waste and no federal workers coming into the office. It's insane. So, stay the course. The pain points are tough. Government workers are nothing but unionized Democrats getting a free paycheck. It's the same in Oregon and it's the same federally. And that is why the machine is really trying to fight Elon Musk and Donald Trump right now. They are, by all ways they can do it, they're fighting the machine as hard as they can because the Democrat power base lies in unionized Democrats working in government. That is what we have to break. And I wish we had a Doge in Oregon, and it should be Doge. Should be Department of Oregon Government Efficiency. Add an extra O in there.
Well, we could maybe that's what Representative Bree Iverson, Representative Bowman can work on is the DOGE Caucus. I'm not sure about the name. Not sure about the name, Brian.
I'm
But
trying. I'm trying it out, Reagan. So,
and I love you. You're always out there because you know that people need like a branding thing that gets stuck in their brain. For instance, I'm doing a memo on some housing stuff that's up on Monday, and one uh, of the things that I was learning about was the Baffy NATO Fund. Okay, and that is all capitalized BAFINATO. and that stands for By and For Initiative Native American Tribes of Oregon, right? But BAFI-NATO is like a great acronym. And, we're going to exchange that for the Tribal Housing Grant Fund, which is not as exciting. I'm going to be honest, Brian.
Yeah.
And
Caffeine
so
native
we
sounds cool.
might need to talk to the governor's office about keeping the fun BAFI-NATO name, call it BAFI-NATO 2. Sequels are really big. Hollywood knows
They
that
are,
those are
yeah.
a big deal. So maybe we need to do that. But, fun acronyms. I think they do need to make a comeback. And I know that that's something that you're working on. Anytime you introduce something, you're trying to find a fun acronym to go with it.
Well, they get the reason why because when you do because omnibus is just kind of a dumb word. So you want to find packages and names for these things because they do kind of stand out and they're easier to market. Because you're trying to get the public interested. You're probably mostly trying to get just other members interested, and it makes it easy when you start talking about. Because it's funny when people come in and they go, "Hey, I want to talk to you about House Bill 2239." You're like, I don't even know. I have zero idea what that means. Like, I don't know. Can you give me more? But if somebody comes in and I want to talk to you about the Banffy NATO, you're like, oh yeah, let's. You know what I mean? Like, it's easier. So that's kind of why you do it. It makes sense from that standpoint. But we'll see what happens with the Doge stuff with Elon. I think I hope they stay the course. I hope that most people I think aren't really paying attention anyways. So I think that I mean from the polling that I'm seeing that Trump's numbers are still really good. Democrats' numbers are in the tank nationally. Their lowest ratings ever in the history of the Democrat Party, which I thought was kind of interesting when I saw that. So, we just got to stay the course with it. And, change is going to be hard. Rounding up these horrible illegal aliens that are just criminals, just rot, horrible people, and throwing them out of our country it's not gonna come with its challenges, and it's not gonna come with its mistakes. It's not gonna come, without making a few errors here and there, and it's gonna be messy. But messy is what got us here, and so it's gonna get a little messy until we get it under control.
And I think that is, and again, I reiterated this because we saw some articles, and if I remember, I'll put them in the show notes. But uh, there's nonprofits, the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, that got defunded by the federal government because of their stance on immigration, which is basically they're using their money to help illegal immigrants get into the country or become citizens or whatever. But the way they were doing it was not aligned with the way that Trump administration wants things to happen. So they cut off their funding. And there's going to be a bunch more of those stories. I mean, here's another headline for the Oregonian: DEI program in Deschutes County dismantled amid
Yeah.
Trump's federal unwinding of diversity initiatives. Now, that was a 2-1 vote. I can guess that Phil Chang, the one Democrat, was probably the lone no vote there.
I
But
think
all of this
he's the
this
DEI on
stuff
the commission.
is deeply embedded in a lot of Oregon's government over the last 20 years, basically. And so there's going to be a problem in Oregon budgets everywhere if they're going to defund. I mean, Sean Duffy, the new head of the Department of Transportation, he was just recently confirmed. He sent a memo, and I know because Rep. Ossar Davis's office showed it to me. He sent a memo saying that we're prioritizing funding for states with high birth rates. Oregon has a low birth rate, and we have more people leaving than coming here, or more people. The only reason that we're even close to steady on keeping the same amount of people in the state is because there's still some people that are moving here. Believe it or not, they're leaving Portland, they're moving to other places in the state, and there are some people still moving in. And so we have basically like even net migration, but we have more deaths than births here. And then the other thing is they're going to prioritize states that don't have DEI, and that's definitely not Oregon. So what happens to the I-5 bridge plan and the transportation package when federal funding
Yeah.
goes bye-bye? That's going to become a huge problem. So suddenly, are we going to see Democrats? Are they going to raise taxes 3 times as much on the gas tax to make up for that, or are they going to choose to dismantle the ODOT DEI programs? Like, they are going to be forced to choose at some
Yeah.
point. And I mean, you and I talked about this in some messaging that I hope that the Republicans put out there. We may have even talked about it on the podcast. We need to show leadership and say, look, we're not in the majority. We don't get to make the final decisions, but we will help you put this budget on firmer foundation. Let's cut, a good chunk of the budget this time on stuff that is not necessary, that is not a must have, so that you have more money to backfill on critical programs that get cut because we have DEI. Now, I don't think that's the most popular position. I think a lot of Republicans would like to just see Oregon government fail, but there are some services we still need to deliver. So let's make sure that we do that, right? And I think that, that would show leadership as opposed to just standing up and saying, no, we're not going to participate with Democrats on anything. We still have to manage the state budget. And that's the kind of messaging that I think would show voters, even in Portland, that we're interested in leading. And yes, we're going to support some of the conservative stuff, especially the stuff Trump does, but he's also the president. But we're not here to break everything. But we are going to need to make some serious, responsible cuts to get this budget in working order if federal funding gets pulled for stuff because of Democrats.
Yeah, and I think this idea that all we're going to do in Oregon is just spend the next 4 years fighting what President Trump's doing, and AG Rayfield is just going to keep rolling out press release after press release that he's joining lawsuits with other blue states that are going to go nowhere because the Supreme Court is Republican. So, I mean, it's literally the stuff Joe Biden was doing, but they don't like it because it's Trump. And that's not, and you're gonna fail at governing along the way because you're right. We do need. I want a strong state government. I want a good education department. I want a good road department. I want, all the things that we need. I want to make sure that, well, I was going to say DEQ, but I hate DEQ. We could do without them. But, we do have a need for state agencies that do good stuff, state parks and all the things that they need funding to run, right? And so we have to have that. And I get that. Medicaid, Medicare. I mean, we got to have the things that we need to do to make things happen. But we are bloated. We are, 100. What it's well north of $100 billion. The state generates about $60 billion ourselves, and then we rely on basically federal funding and fees and all the other stuff for everything else that puts us, way north of $140 billion. I mean, if you just think about that, even our budget has ballooned so much in the last 15 years. I mean, it's just horrible. And they're going to do what they, their goal is to basically just tax more or not let things go, like, take the kicker back, like do all the things they need to do. I think we saw fee increases almost in every agency that's come through Ways and Means subcommittees so far. And fee increases are a way to not do general fund increases. So right. if that, whatever it is that your service you're providing as an agency is so vitally important to Oregonians, then fund it with general fund money. Stop coming back to Oregonians when they expect that why should my hunting and fishing license be freaking $400 in Oregon because you can't get your crap together? That's bullshit. So, and if you don't want to fund it with general fund money, then don't do it. Get out of the business. So it's just stupid to me. And I hope that, Republicans, we got to stay the line. They obviously, can vote whatever they want to vote in because they got enough members on both sides of their chambers to do it. But they don't really like the pinch points when we kind of jump up and down and pound our feet. And I think we have to do that respectfully. We have to do that where, it makes, there's going to be some areas where it does make sense for us to look at things that, weren't there before, but we have to be very tactful with how we go forward with it and produce proposals and strategies like we did on the housing, what did you change my name there because you didn't like Senate Republican housing proposal? You made it the bicameral, bipartisan housing proposal plan. Because I guess I did put some Democrat bills in there and House bills and Senate bills, but at least we put forth a plan. We said the only way that we're going to build houses, and Governor Kotek, if you're listening, I know your staff listens. So it's land, regulations, and infrastructure. Rent control on poor little Aunt Betty's mobile home park of 12 people on the coast isn't going to get you more houses. It's just going to get you higher rents. You have to focus on land regulations and infrastructure. And infrastructure costs money, and we don't have a lot of it. So in land, the enviros don't want any of it. They want zero land. They don't want any growth. So that's it's a tough vote for Democrats. We, I think, have a couple of pretty good proposals that we're putting forth that are they're bites at the apple. They're not the panacea of Las Vegas where you just start chewing up subdivisions, but they're good ideas, right? And then, but we're going to really hone in on regulations, and the cities and the counties, they're not going to be fans, but they're kind of a roadblock. And so we have to basically say, well, if you're not going to help us, then we're going to have to get you out of the way. And I don't know if the Democrats have the strength to stand with us. I hope they do. I really do. I mean, I know they want to. I know they want to say, hey, let's get the heck out of the way and get some houses built. Why? Because we are in an emergency, and blue tarps aren't going to be sufficient enough for everybody.
No, it's right. And I think like that's the thing that I think to bring it all the way back around as we start to wrap up. The thing that bothers me so much about the apparent inaction in this building is there's all this stuff that we say is so important, and the lack of quick, decisive action is why people have lost faith in government. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that government can't accomplish these problems. It's that we've decided that what we're going to do is we're going to hold months of stakeholder meetings and let everybody say how they feel about everything instead of calling the two or three people into the room, say, what's the bottom line? What's possible? What's not possible? Then we take the proposal of 20 bills and turn it into 10 bills and then run them through the process. And they're going to die a little bit in the process. But doing that, it never happens at the beginning of session. It always happens at the end of session. And so that is the thing that also leads me to think that we don't need a 6-month session. That is all a 6-month session does is give us all this time to hold stakeholder meetings. And I get public participation is important, and we do that in the public hearings. But Democrats have decided that 1 hour and a half hearing and everybody gets 30 seconds to testify is enough for public. So then stop pretending that we need all these additional meetings. Then just forget it. Then let's just go ahead and move forward. And so I think that's where, it's, I don't know, week 2, 3 of the official legislature. And it's just like, what are we doing? Why are we here?
But housing is a great example of and I'll close my housing thing on this one because it is a quote unquote emergency, right? There is literally an emergency declaration on housing. Now, there's also one in California where they had a little fire. So what Gavin Newsom did, because he realizes that his political future probably rests on the reconstruction of the Palisades and Malibu and stuff down there. So what are they doing? They're literally stripping the entire deck of regulations so they can build houses faster. So they can do it. So, but yet what are we doing is we're getting nothing but pushback from everybody. So, well, we can't do that one. Well, we can't do that one. And it's like, well, then are we really in an emergency? Because ever since we declared an emergency, we've built less houses for the last 2 years. So at what point are we going to step up and say we need 100,000 houses? The own agency said we need to build 100,000. We're 100,000 houses behind, and our goal, the governor's bill, is to do middle housing in unincorporated UGB areas. Really?
Well, and if you look at that report, we were trying to simplify it for the press conference because you only get 3 minutes and limited attention span. You look at the whole report, 100,000 only gets us to exactly what we need for housing today. That's our deficit to get us to today. Projecting future growth, and I don't know if this report was December 2024, so it's pricing in a lot of the negativity. 450,000 more housing units. Doesn't have to be houses, but 75% of people basically want to live in a single family detached homes. So for all intents and purposes, it's basically almost all houses. Where are you getting that production from? You won't get it. We don't have it. We're not going to get it. And if we nibble around the edges on these issues, it's the same thing with education. This applies to everything. Applies to housing. This applies to transportation. This applies to education funding. Trump and Elon are not afraid to break things. And there are too many people in this legislature that are afraid to break stuff.
Yep.
And the problem is voters have not punished Republicans or Democrats for being ineffective. They punish them for other things in different elections. They don't punish them for being ineffective. Stop being afraid to break stuff. Stop being afraid to think differently. Stop being afraid to be creative. Stop being afraid to make your friends mad, both sides of the aisle, and just say, let's just do something different and let's see what happens. And
Yeah.
then maybe you lose your elections. And even then, I think you look back on it, the legislator from Lynn County, whose name escapes me, but I'll put a link to the Oregon Encyclopedia, which is a really good website for Oregon history stuff. I use it all the time. The Lynn County senator that passed the land use bill, Senate Bill 100, he lost his next election. He obviously believed in it. Obviously, was a thing that stood the test of time. The guy served 4 years and then got cleaned out of the legislature. So your time is limited here anyway, even if you accomplish
Yeah.
the big, amazing thing. So go do something worth being remembered, right?
I think,
Anyway, that's my
well,
rant.
you're right. And I think ultimately good when we're trying to work through some of these policy stuff, you have to tell people like, well, if you're not in uncomfortable spaces and conversations where you have to give in a little bit, then it's probably not good policy. That means
Correct.
one side's taking it in the shorts and the other side's just capitalizing, and that's not going to be good policy. There's a reason why we have divided government, and why our founders set it up that way, because they knew that you had to have good ideas, you had to have conversations with all the stakeholders, and until we get the stakeholders all in uncomfortable spaces, then where they have to give in a little bit to get some policy passed, then we're not going to actually have good policy, and then we won't solve problems. So,
Brian, I don't know if you can hear that, but the fire alarm is going off here in the
oh, I
Capitol.
hear it now.
We might have to cut this out because that will, of course, give away the fact that I'm
Uh-oh.
recording the podcast in the Capitol. But I don't know if that's illegal yet. Might have to ask the Ethics Commission. Anyway,
No, Bonham used to do it all the time. Remember, he did his podcast in the.
yeah, but he's elected, so we'll see. Anyway, well,
All
I
right.
think I probably have to leave the building
Cut it.
technically.
Let's
So
cut it short. Okay. Take care of yourself, Reagan.
thanks, Brian.